Welcome. This is 20 to 21 developer tips to optimize your workflow. My name is Jon Borgonia, and you can reach me on our Seattle JS Slack. I am at Jon Borgonia on Slack, and everywhere else, GitHub, Twitter, I'm at The Remix. And here's a link to the slides so you don't have to furiously write notes down. I work at a fintech company called Digit, digit.co, where we make investments and savings a lot more easier, simpler, and intelligently for you. I also organize for Seattle JS Hackers and talked a little bit about events coming up for that. So I'm doing this talk because engineers naturally learn, grow, and get better at solving problems. Though what I found is that workflow doesn't always evolve automatically. It does take a conscious effort. So my first tip is on how to do that, or how I do that. So to adopt a habit, I found that learning just one new thing every week is really helpful, because if I pack on like 10 new different ways to do something, I'm just gonna forget all of them. So I just, find one thing that I found that someone else does that could help my workflow, practice that for a week or more, and then do the next thing. I've also taken out days like a Sunday and meet up with colleagues, coworkers, and we just kind of do a day where we learn more about our current tools that we're using, or maybe some plugins that we haven't really unlocked the full potential of, and lots of configuration. We like to customize things to our very needs. So we'll do that on Sunday, and then just improve every week. And sometimes the things that I've learned, I may forget. So I don't feel like it's too much of a bad thing to have to relearn things. Let's say if I didn't have to use a particular tool or shortcut that week, then relearning on the week is totally fine. So let's get started with browser tools. So let's do some hotkeys that you may or may not already be aware of. So let me go to Programmer Humor. Cool. So Command L. I don't know if you know this, but if you do Command L, it will highlight your address bar. So it's a quick way to Command L, and then you can just copy paste to wherever you want to share it to. I found that to be really useful. Command Option I to open your dev tools. A lot of times when I see people, inspect an element or open their console, they do right click anywhere on the page and do inspect, and then bam, here's the console, right? So that's how a lot of people get to the console. It's pretty handy because your right hand's already on your mouse. Did you know that you could do Command Option I to toggle your dev tools open and closed? It's really useful for me. You could also do Command Shift C, which will open your dev tools and do the select element. So now I'm in a mode where I can hover around and select an element, and here we go. I can edit things here. And then Command Shift P is the command palette. Similar to VS Code and other editors, you could do Command Shift P. And let's say I want to go to the network tab, or let's say I want to clear my console. Some background noise. I'm gonna let that. Okay. Yeah. So Command Shift P, command palette. You can do things. Console. Cool. You can also toggle your console open and closed using escape. So escape will toggle your console. So here's a fun little tip if you've not heard of this before. There's something called design mode, where if you type document.design mode equals on, then you can click into your page here and you can just start typing. Anywhere, yeah. So really useful or fun. I don't know if it's that useful. So my next tip is window management. So your desktop environment may have native shortcuts to move windows around. and resize them. If not, then you could use something like Rectangle or Veer, which are apps that let you do shortcuts that move your windows around. You can move it to left, right, or full screen them. And it's really useful for making quick split screens like this. So this, I'm using Rectangle, and it gives you all these. API documentation, we all have to access them sometime. When you're writing a JavaScript, you'll probably go to Mozilla Developer Network and close the console. Maybe you want to search for filter. And I'm actually looking for array filter, and it's not really what I'm looking for. So a quick way to get to the Mozilla Developer Network API docs is you could use mdn.io, which is basically a shortcut, and then your query like array filter. And it just searches and goes directly to the definition and the documentation here. So let's do that once more, mdn.io, whoever remembers the arguments to reduce. Here we go. There's also dev docs for other languages. We have a lot of frameworks and languages here. And we can look for filter, and it'll search within all of those. It's really useful. Dev docs is pretty awesome. And if you wanted to have your documentation offline, I really recommend Dash. I use this a lot, especially when I was learning new languages. Dash is basically what DevDocs is, except it's offline. So you download the latest documentation for the languages you want, and then you can, do some programming on the plane. It's really useful. All right, so let's get into the command line. I don't know if you know this yet or not. You don't always have to type the same commands over and over. If you've already typed it, you can access your history using up and down arrows, right? So I'm going through my history by pressing up and down. Let me make this bigger, actually. Oh, that's the wrong way. All right, it's big enough. So up and down arrows, use them, type less. You could also reverse search. Let's say a command is something you wrote a week ago, like how do I run a test that I want to run? Yeah, so Control R. Actually, if you're using Z shell, it's going to look a little bit different, like npm test. It'll look like this, and it's still really useful. It's just to toggle through your history, you would keep pressing Control R until you reach the end of your history. Oops. So Control R is really useful. Jump between words. Yeah, I found this to be really useful. Let me go test. Cool. So you can hold Option and press left and right arrows to jump between words and arguments. This doesn't come by default on a vanilla Z shell installation, though. So here's a quick config that you'd have to add to your ZSHRC file so that you have this ability to option left and right navigation. It's way easier than holding left down and right down for a really long time. You can also jump to the beginning of your command with Control A, and then, you might have to press Control A twice, and then jump to the end with Control E. So here I'm pressing Control A, Control E to just jump to the beginning and to the end. This also works on text just generally in OS X, though this works in any terminal I found, like Linux or whatever. You could also delete arguments using Control W. So if you want to jump to the end here and then change your arguments, you can do Control W. And here I'm deleting by pressing Control W. And you could type in other things. So basically unlock your shell's potential. There's a lot of things you can do. And if you're on the command line, even a little bit, it gets to be very, a very good experience if you learn how to use your shell a lot better, or configure it to do things you need to do quite often. You could also check out FCF. That's kind of what's powering when I do Control R for reverse search. That's what is helping out this plugin. It's something called Fuzzy Finder, FCF. Yeah. All right, moving on. Some Git tips. So TIG is the tool that you can install if you have a OS X. You can install with Homebrew. Brew install TIG, and what it does is it gives you some more ways to view your Git repo. So I'm looking at a list of commits. That's the main view. If I hit enter, I'll look at details of the commit. I can also look at, what is this, a log. I pressed L. I could also look at the status of my current repo with S, right? So it's actually pretty simple to learn because H will give you your help, and there's just a few views. Like tree view is pretty useful. So you can dive in to your actual repo like that. So TIG is pretty cool. Check it out. And for my Git diffs, I found that the vanilla Git diff is pretty hard to read or just view with my eyes. So Diffsofancy is a tool that I've, or a script that I've installed. And here's my Git diff. It splits it up between left and right. So here's the additions on the right side. Here's a change in the middle here. It shows the file name and some context, like this change here. I deleted this function underneath this function. It's pretty useful. Easier to see my diffs. So that's Diffsofancy. All right, data formatting. So if you work a lot with data interchange formats like JSON, you might run into issues where, let's see, you get some data, right? And it's all in one line. It's kind of hard to see the structure, like what is a child of what? Like these are pilots, and it's hard to tell if pilots is a child or on the root. So you could format this by piping it, the pipe character, to Python-m JSON tool. And most systems have Python installed, so this kind of comes for free with most operating systems. And then it just formats it nicely for you. Oops. It's pretty nice. And if you're going to be using this a lot, like on your local development environment, then I recommend JQ, which does a similar thing. It will format it. Yeah, it's colored. It's kind of nice, though it could do a lot more. You can query certain things. Like if I wanted to get the name, I could just say name. So I pass in a string. Dot is the root, and then name, and it gives me the name. I can also get pilots, which is an array. So it's in an array format. I could also get each pilot on its own string by passing in this syntax. And now I just have 4 strings. So this gets really powerful. For example, if I just look at all starships, that's hard to read. Let's, yeah, so here's all the starships, right? And inside of results is an array, and they all have, name, model, manufacturer, right? Name, model. I could query this to get the results, each result, get their name, and it will print out all of the names. JQ is pretty powerful. And if you're using something like YAML, then there is an equivalent tool called YQ you can install as well. Some more JSON formatting in JavaScript. You could, if you console log a piece of JSON, you'll get it all in one line, just as we just saw. A quick tip is to JSON stringify it and pass in 2 more arguments. So null for the second argument, and then 2, the third argument is how many spaces to indent your formatted JSON. Oops, we'll get to that. So last set of tips is the console. I guess we can open this up. Let's say we have a couple of variables, cat and dog. I often find sometimes when I console log both cat and dog, then, I'll get both of their values. Though I might forget in my logs, I might forget what this variable was and what this variable was. So a quick tip is to wrap it in curly braces, which makes an object, and it'll be self-labeling. So cat is meow and dog is woof. This obviously doesn't work all the time, especially with nested objects using dot notation. That won't quite work. Though it's simple things that'll work like that. It's kind of useful sometimes. You can also use console table, and then you can get your output formatted in a table, which could be really useful if you're looking at, it's like window.location. This also works in Node. No, it's not just a browser thing. I'm just using this browser console. And then finally, colors in your console. You can use the syntax with the %C and then your value that you want to print. And then a second argument is your CSS that you want applied to that. If you wanted two different colors, you can do %C twice, and then you can add more arguments for each %C for coloring it. And that's about it. Here's a bit.ly link to this slide deck. Yeah, thanks for coming to my tech talk.